diversity is about making sure that when we're trying to solve problems, we include as broad viewpoints as we can, because that's likely that will generate better products, better ideas, better solutions.
Diversity, I believe, is the place where these cultures intersect. It's like a Venn diagram. So we still maintain part of those core things about who we are, but then there's these places of intermingling.
Diversity is where you turn a blind eye to your hiring practices and your management practices. You get the best people who can fulfill that and not worry about where they come from, how they grew up, what their backgrounds are, what the beliefs are.
For me personally, it is being able to understand, or at least attempt to understand and accept different views.
And that's where the sauce is. That's where it's exciting. That's where you have a white man trying to do the samba. Yeah. And it's just cool to watch.
To me, diversity is just letting people, accepting people as they are. I mean, I think that's one thing that I learned a long time ago in the country was we accepted everybody until they proved they weren't worthy of being accepted.
Because not everyone comes from the same background, same experience as you, and not everybody has the same social impacts growing up and social values growing up.
Truly, we do see color on a very consistent basis. We see it all the time. And we associate certain interpretations based on what we see. The human eye is designed to discriminate. It sees yellow, it sees green, it sees blue. So a world where race doesn't exist it's not a real world. But I think a world where race is celebrated is possible.
In Thailand, I went into a lab where they asked us to take off our shoes, which I thought was unusual because in laboratories, you might have something fall off a desk and actually, hit your foot, right, including a lead brick.
So when I'm working with someone from a different culture, at times I'll be working on a project and I'll have what I think our goals are and our track for going there. And all of a sudden, one of the guys I'm working with, he's just gone and I don't know what he's doing. And when I catch up with him later, he was working on something completely different because someone older than him told him that's how he should do it.
And that's actually sometimes the scariest thing about culture, sometimes bringing nuclear security into these different cultures, because in some cases you defer to somebody who has a lot of age or who is, you might feel is of a higher status than you. But in nuclear security, it's very, very important that you treat everybody the same, no matter what.
His culture is when somebody older than you tells you something and asks you to do something, you do it.
Culturally, we would call as a disagree and commit philosophy. And it's typically around decisions. There are a lot of times when you could see varying degrees of compliance in that philosophy. Disagree and commit means that if there's a decision being made and you are one of the performers or just in general a stakeholder, once the person who is the decision maker has rendered the decision, if you happen to disagree with that decision, as a team member, from that point on, it is expected that you disagree but commit and facilitate the decision to be successful, or do your best to make that decision being carried out.
And if somebody who might be, let's say, the president of the company decides, hey, we're going to unlock all our doors to get to the nuclear reactor just because it's easier for everybody to get there, right, somebody needs to stand up and go, sir, that's not a good idea because you're affecting security and you're affecting safety.
But when I first started, there was definitely more doing than discussing. When someone older than you told you that, hey, this is what needs to be done, this is how you're going to do it. I know you may not agree with it, but you're going to do it anyways.
We can get to better ideas if we have diversity in perspectives.
You have to have a team that can work together. And if that team does not have that same mindset in accepting all types of people into the workplace, they don't get to be on the team.
Race is a very physical, visible thing. You know, you hear people say that they're colorblind. That's not true. You know, you are as white as you'll ever be, and I'm as black or brown, however you want to call it, you're as we'll ever be. We do see that, but what matters is what we do with what we see.
People are taught to hate, and they don't even understand why.
I think race becomes the first thing we attach to the discussion on diversity because it's the easiest thing, and sometimes it's the laziest thing to address.
And understand that sometimes the diversity, especially when you have diversity in culture, there are cultural differences in the way in which ethical issues are considered and assessed, evaluated, looked at. So you have to come to a perhaps mediated understanding or resolution of whatever you consider the ethical violation to be. And you have to be open to discussion at that point.
Technical diversity, I think, the diversity of technical views, it existed even within any given ethnic group, right? I mean, you have people who are type A personality and etc., etc. So what I came to understand is engineers who had grown up here, they seemed more enterprising and more willing to take risks, and it reflected in their decision making. It reflected in their openness to take up ideas that would present challenges, but one that they believed they could overcome. Whereas folks who had not grown up in this culture, like myself, who had come from other countries, I found if I were to just paint everybody with a broad brush, it would be that we were more conservative in how far we thought we could take something and how many risks we could take.
And the ethical thing to do is to always take that higher ground. You know, if you have a chance to go down a path that is a higher risk for a patient, but the benefit could outweigh the risk, you present that information honestly, factually. You back it up with good clinically validated information.
And the first thing, though, the management's they gotta live it, they gotta breathe it, they gotta walk it, they gotta talk it. They have to support it. Because I learned a long time ago that if it's not important to the boss, it's not important to me. And that's a bad attitude.
And make sure that I always take that into consideration as making decisions, not to let my personal or my group's personal aims to jeopardize the overall goals of the organization.
That's also important all the way up the chain. And the nuclear safety culture that they established here in the United States says that the leaders have to live, breathe it, and believe it. And I see it all the time.
So it's all taking the time to understand that any small actions can have an impact that will go on and on broader.
However, that doesn't mean that you totally jettison the essence of your ethical standards. If you believe something is wrong, there's probably not going to be a whole lot that's going to convince you that it's right. That it's right.
It is like the old saying, treat others as you would like to be treated. You know, give them the information that you think you would like to have. If you were asked to invest, if you were asked to be part of the corporation. So that goes for employees, it goes for investors, it goes to physicians and the patients that you're going to be, using the product on.
So it is a very simple thing that I try to do the right thing for me, for people who work with me, but always from the optics of the larger organization and the stakeholders of that organization. So doing the right thing for all of us.
It is to give that sense of honesty and trust and be straightforward with what the product can do, what it cannot do. Mm-hmm. So down the road, there's not a secret or a stone unturns and people are surprised. So you lay it all out there and you say, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do.
The first rule of medicine, I'm pretty sure you know, is do not harm. It's not treat, it's do not harm first. Right. So there are things that I had problems with the employers, of course in hospitals. If the treatment is equally effective, I always choose a cheap one. But some employers are not very happy with that, right? Because they want to make money.
There's always opportunity to expand market share and to go outside of what your indications are for your product. When it comes to using the product for off-label use or defining the scope of the product, there are specific times where either I was asked to perhaps manipulate an intended use or go outside a range of what the products could do. And, I am an obstacle sometimes.
To be in a big ethical dilemma, there's usually small things that get you there. And it would be difficult from what I've seen, it's difficult to kind of get to that situation because there's multiple blocks in the way that you have to purposely try to get past.
I just say no. We'll not do that. So from an ethical standpoint, you have to be willing to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do that. Here's why. And use what means are available to you so that your decision sticks. Mm-hmm. And those opportunities present themselves often in the medical device world.
It's not easy because the people that you are dealing with knows what he's doing. And he tells you exactly that, we have to make money, this or that, and if this guy is not an MD, how you're gonna deal with it, At the end of the road, you say, well, if you're not happy with my work, this is the end of the road for me and for you. So you can't do that. It's a crime. I think it's a crime.
You're not going to always encounter everybody with the same work ethic that you have.
But right now in 416, I have a record number of students submitting peer evals on their partners on the two-person project, because I made a point of saying it is an important issue when people do not contribute to work.
There was a time when, project after project, I had to work with a specific engineer that just did not share that work ethic and would not really cover the items that was assigned to him. And on one specific project, I finally stopped covering for him because it was just doubling my work every single time.
It's an ethical issue. You're supporting the lie when you just cover it up and accept it. You're allowing somebody to benefit from your work. They're receiving credit and credentials for a skill that we don't know if they have or not. And do you want to be part of that?
But it ultimately led to that project was never finished, which ended up more impacting me negatively than it did him, because in the end, the data that was needed, I needed to move on for other projects. The impact to him was very small, Okay, it was one more item that he wasn't really doing.
You can't live your life that way. You can't bury your head in the sand. Eventually the problems will get bigger, the issues will get more intense, and you'll have a greater difficulty or be digging yourself into a real hole if you continue to back away from issues like this.
But on the other side of that, that same employee I actually work more closely with now is I had to find a way to work with him in what he values and he finds passion in. And by doing that, by encouraging him to work on items that he is passionate about and covering items that he's not, I found a way to balance the work between the two of us and to where you get more work out overall.
And so I think that by showing our students and everyone to be very careful with these small ones, people do not create a climate where the big ones may happen. I never worked in a place that I saw any people trying to lie or trying to show the wrong information, be it in research, be it in terms of a product. So, but the reason that you don't get to that point, I think, is because the students start as students to be confronted with those shortcuts that hopefully most of the time they do not take it. And if they take it, that they understand that's a bad way of doing things. And then, the course helps in pointing out that when things scale, it can really hurt society.
It's not necessarily that you can't just avoid people. You're going to work with them and they're not always going to agree with you. They're not always going to share your passion in all the areas. Learning how to work with them, I think, is the key item.
It's going to be impossible in your career to avoid ethical situations. And so the sooner you get comfortable with sort of letting people know what your ethical standards are, and the sooner you get comfortable with speaking up when there's a violation or taking action if it's appropriate, the better off you're going to be.
I would say ethics is an important topic. Cultural diversity is definitely also important. And the combination and being able to understand and navigate the two together, because your ethics based off your experiences are always going to change. So the ethics of, say, someone from Korea that I'm working with, even though they could be making a decision based off their ethics that I find ethically wrong, but that doesn't mean I can just tell them, no, you're wrong. I can't just step aside. We need to work together still, and we need to come to something that both of us reach our goals, but both of us aren't crossing lines for.
You need to have a good understanding of who you are and what your values are as you go into the professional world. And if you've developed an attitude as a student where you look the other way, I think you're going to have a very difficult time. I don't believe anything good can come from violating your own standards, and eventually some degree of harm might come your way.
If someone defends something, he or she has a reason to do that. It may be cultural, it may be this or that, but at the end of the day, you will certainly learn something from them, good or bad.
When my granddaughter had her appendix burst, she was 5 years old, and my mom sent me a picture of her just getting up out of the bed after the surgery the next day. She's holding on to a pole, standing there, bracing herself with this pole. She's got this IV in her arm, and on that pole is my infusion pump.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, that really hits home, that something you do has an effect